Thank you so much for listening to the Talking Classical podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the Talking Classical podcast and you'll receive a notification every time a new episode is released. You can also follow the Talking Classical podcast on Twitter, on the Talking Classical blog, and on Facebook and YouTube. Many thanks for listening once again. I hope that you'll be able to join me for the next episode very soon. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Talking Classical podcast. It's so great to be back after a bit of time off and I hope that you're staying safe and well wherever you are in the world. Today I've been recording a discussion with Meghan Picerno, who is a coloratura soprano and Broadway soprano actor. Meghan is a wonderful and unique artist who's enjoyed a career not only in the classical opera world, but more recently in musical theatre. So we talked about Meghan's career in opera and the turning point for her when she took on the role of Cunegonde in Leonard Bernstein's Candide. We also talked about the crossover and some of the differences between opera and musical theatre in terms of technique, styles, interpretation, and performance. It's great to hear that Meghan is keen to bring her experience of acting, performance, and singing styles from musical theatre back into the opera that she initially trained in. This is a fascinating conversation for those of you who perhaps come from more of a classical or operatic background or listen to more of that music, and you'll be learning more about the musical theatre world and vice versa if there are any listeners who are more bent towards musicals. Thank you very much to Meghan for taking the time to talk to me for this podcast, and thank you for listening. Please let me know what you think, and I hope that you enjoy this discussion. Hello.
Hi, Annabelle.
Hi, Meghan. It's so lovely to meet you, at least in person.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too.
Yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's lovely to have people like you who are doing both opera and musical theatre. It's so rare, and I think that's something we can talk about later on. You must be really busy at the moment.
Yeah, it's the Wild West right now with pandemic happenings, and it's a little crazy.
It's just the backlog of all the concerts that were supposed to take place, and they're all
exactly. Yeah. It's a wild time.
Yeah, you just finished the run of Phantom on Broadway, didn't you? Congratulations!
Thank you. Very proud of that chapter.
You moving back more into opera again, or are you still keeping on the musical theatre?
No, honestly, I'm living in both worlds, which is pretty awesome. Also TV, film, and voiceover work. So it's just kind of spread out like a tree and all of its branches. So, I mean, the root of it is classically trained opera, but, within those realms, there's so many things that are interrelated. So it's been pretty amazing to take advantage of all these different kinds of mediums to perform.
Yeah, and they all like inform each other, don't they?
Absolutely. And I think that's what's so amazing about now, as opposed to decades ago when it was very frowned upon to cross over. In this day and age, it's amazing because I think it's encouraged, especially with all the social media, TikTok and Instagram and just everything. And, there's how many streaming services now? I don't even know, so many. So there's just a lot of opportunities if you're open-minded and you're also extremely cool with probably feeling like you have no idea what you're doing for a while, and then you're fine.
Yeah, because I know that there's a handful of you who are doing that whole opera musical theatre. I mean, do you know Julian Ovenden?
I don't.
Oh, not yet. You must work with him at some point. He'd be right up your street. Well, he's a British. He's done Bridgerton and Downton Abbey, but he was classically trained originally, I think, and then he went off and did acting and musical theatre. So, I
mean, it is possible. Opera singers get a bad rap that we can't act, but that is not true. I mean, for some people, sure, but it's just, what it is in conservatory, we're pounded over the head to always just singing.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to it. Especially, look, the Met opera has their HD broadcasts. I really wish that conservatories taught acting in many different mediums. And because I don't think they really are still to this day, as much as I believe they should be to classically trained students, it's really up to the performer then to expand their reach and take those classes, which, by the way, are very intimidating. Like, your first film class, you're like, wait, why, what? Or your first pure theater class where there's no music under you and you're just speaking. As an opera singer, it can be very unnerving, honestly, at first, especially when you're trained to be an Olympic athlete of singing and you're so amazing at this one particular thing. To cross over at first, you really feel kind of like a fish out of water. But the cool thing is you can grow legs. Also, you can grow wings and fly. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. So as long as you're open-minded and you're brave enough to give it a go, honestly, I think we'll see more crossover artists. I mean, I hope.
Yeah, definitely. And when did you get the opera bug, Meghan? When did you know that you wanted to be an opera singer? Did you know that was what you always wanted to do?
Oh no, I'm kind of an odd bird. I was not born out of the womb knowing about opera. In fact, I only saw my first opera ever in my life, my junior year of high school, one with my French class. Of course, opera is so subliminally in our lives without us even knowing, cartoons and commercials. But no, I didn't grow up on music theater. I didn't grow up on opera. I grew up on rock. I grew up on, so it's funny. So my first hint of me being interested in it was indeed when we went to see, I grew up in Chicago. And my first hint of it is when my French class went to see Romeo and Juliet by Gounod. And I remembered being absolutely mesmerized at this performance at the Chicago Lyric. And my entire class was just like, so bored. This is amazing. What is this? And so for fun, just literally for fun, I started taking classical lessons, but truly just for fun. I had no intention of going into it as a profession or anything. And then my senior year, I went to my second opera, which was Carmen, again, with my French class. And that year, too, there's something called All State Theater. And it happened to be Pirates of Penzance that year. And I was cast as the lead, Mabel. So that was my first little toe into a somewhat classical world, operetta. And it wasn't until I was an undergrad when I realized, I love classical singing. I love how incredible it is. I love how it just really shows the reach of what a human voice can do. I also love languages. So opera, of course, it can encompass so many different things. So, but truly, it wasn't until I graduated grad school that I realized this is what I'd like to do for a profession. Yes, which sounds mind blowing because one would think that by the time you're like, I'm going to grad school, I'm going to conservatory, you'd think you'd know really. But I don't think a lot of people know they really want to do it as a profession until you graduate and you realize what that means. And it's
realize that they don't want to do it at all.
That too, which honestly, I think can be very difficult. But I really pat my colleagues on the back that decided it wasn't for them and they decided to pivot, because that's a hard decision to do, especially when you sacrifice so much for it. But it really is, look, it's like 0.00001% of the people that skyrocket to the top right out of school, right? Very few people, and very few of those people stay successful. So what no one tells you in school is what that in between is like, particularly if you're not from a wealthy family, which I'm not. I mean, we're not poor, but I had to fund myself through school and afterward. And it's hard. And it's that point when literally you're choosing, do I eat a nice meal or do I pay for my voice lesson? It's literally that. That's the moment that are you hungry enough to do this profession or not? And so it was after I graduated from grad school, that's when I knew I wanted to do this as a profession, which is wild because that wasn't that long ago.
Wow. Okay. So what was your first professional engagement then out of school?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know. I feel like it might have been Die Zauberflöte at Carnegie Hall, maybe, but like a concert version. Was that one of my first ones? I mean, okay, it wasn't like yesterday, but I don't know. I feel like that was definitely in there. That was one of them.
Start at the top, you know.
Well, look, here's a fun fact though. You know, what's interesting is just when I was about to audition for like the big houses, you know, like the Met,
Yeah.
is when Broadway came knocking at my door. So actually, even at this point, I have yet to audition for those huge houses, which is kind of hilarious to me that, you know, I took a different train for a hot second. So yeah, I think it was Die Zauberflöte, Queen. I was singing Queen of the Night, which quite frankly, I'm done with. I don't want to sing Queen anymore. I mean, I love F's, but honestly, I'd rather be the plucky bird. So, but yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah. So tell us about that transition then that you just mentioned into musical theatre. You said that you were about to audition for the major houses. I know that you've done some competitions. I know you've done Operalia. So what happened next?
Oh, well, so here's an interesting thing too, even about Operalia. It's almost as if the universe was foreshadowing things to come. So, and this is how always my life has been. Things kind of drop out of the sky into my lap. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's good. I was at a dinner party near Lincoln Center, and it was after I was singing in China at the NCPA. And I came back, and the wonderful couple, Martha and Tian, who were hosting a dinner party, and the Domingos were there. And so we were all having champagne and everything. And so Placido goes to the piano and starts playing Glitter and Be Gay. And Martha, his wife, was like, you know, you should come to Operalia. So it was with Glitter and Be Gay, with him playing the piano, us all bubbly with champagne. And so that is significant because that was one of the first times I sang that aria, actually. Fast forward a few years later, and here I am auditioning for New York City Opera for Cunegonde in their revival of Candide. And that truly is the moment that changed my life. Like once I got cast in Candide, my career just took a huge shift, which was a gamble because I was all ready to go to Paris, you know, sing, be at the Bastille, all of this stuff. And I was like, well, this is interesting. I should see what this is. And I'm so happy I did because, again, it's one of those kismet things. When everything is meant to happen for you, it falls into place. But you work really hard. And I never would have imagined the last 5 years, 6 years of my life would have been what they were coming from the opera world at all. Yeah. Like I never would have, if you would have told me, oh, you'll be on a Broadway stage on point in ballet shoes, singing one of the most iconic roles in Broadway, I would have been like, oh, sure. But it happened. And truly because of Candide, that's the one production that absolutely changed my life. And I'm so grateful and happy for it.
And it's just such an incredible role that really, I think, crosses the boundaries between opera and musical theatre. And I know that this is a role that you've performed all over the world, and you've had the chance to perform with Michael Tilson Thomas, I understand, who directly worked with Leonard Bernstein. What was that experience like?
Oh, incredible. MTT is it goes without saying, but he's amazing. I have been very, very lucky even with the New York City production of Candide, I was working with Hal Prince, you know,
Yes.
So I'm working with people who directly had a connection to the show itself. And then, of course, right after that, Michael Tilson Thomas with the San Francisco Symphony, adore, working with someone that was a protege of Bernstein. Yet again, here I am getting this just complete gateway into the music and into this world. I couldn't be luckier, honestly. So working with him it just furthered my thirst to know more about everything. And the way that his musicality, the way that he approaches a score, the way that he approached Candide itself was also very exciting because, you know, something as a crossover artist, and I think the reason I love Candide so much, singing Cunegonde, is you're right. It's such a blend of both worlds. And I think there's a trap, which is either someone sings it too perfectly classically, but it's so boring then, in my opinion. You need that mix of daring and danger when you sing it. And I think that's something that because of Michael Tilson Thomas, and then I also premiered it at the Opera del Liceo in Barcelona. I was like, I can't believe this has never been here. But it was interesting. Each time I've done that role, I realized, and this is not meant to be egotistical, this is a role I was always born to play. Like, this is one of them. You always know it when you feel it. She's one of them. Cunegonde is definitely, there's a reason she keeps coming back in my life. I just did it with Cincinnati Symphony, actually. And it keeps getting better and better because that blend that happens, I think I'm starting to refine it more and more because I've lived in both worlds now. So people like Michael Tilson Thomas being in Phantom and on Broadway for a few years, that's also changed the access of colors I have. It's really exciting. And I'm happy it's a role that I'm known for. And I can't wait to keep singing her.
Fantastic. And I was actually just going to ask you, I mean, do you find that you can use the same voice for opera and musical theatre, or do you find that you have to use different technique, or do you have a different kind of colour palette or timbre that you use?
It is different. And I'm very lucky because my teacher, Matt Farnsworth, so he actually studies with a very famous opera teacher all his life. So what was really cool about him and wonderful is he understands where I'm coming from and where I did come from. So I started taking lessons from him while I was in Candide 5 years ago. Was that 5 years ago? 6 years ago? It is different, without getting too technical. The larynx placement is different. How you engage the diaphragm, how you engage your breathing, where you're placing the vowel formation is a little bit different. And even within music theater itself, there's different kinds of placement. Like how Andrew Lloyd Webber is its own animal. That's its whole other thing that's very different than singing even Sound of Music or Glinda and Wicked. They're very different things. Yeah. But what's amazing is because I had such incredible teachers in my opera life, Diana Soviero is my mama lion. My understanding of my body and my instrument is pretty amazing, if I say so myself. So because of that, I'm able to switch and modify things as needed. But it's difficult. And also you have to be really smart about things. For instance, I'm not going to belt and then sing Marie from La Fille du Régiment. That's a bad idea. So that's the thing too. It involves a lot of planning. So even like doing a concert, I'll be very particular about what's on the concert. Obviously, my voice is more prone to golden age repertoire as opposed to like, yeah. I would sound like an SNL skit if I tried to do Hamilton or anything like that. I'll leave that. But it is very different. And also, to be really honest, one of the great challenges in Phantom was to thin my voice out because I naturally have a pretty large coloratura voice.
You have a very fruity, you've got you've got a Zwischenfach voice, haven't you?
Yeah, I do, which is kind of, on one hand, it's amazing. It also means, though, you have to show people that you can do more than one thing, right? Because everyone likes to put people in boxes.
Exactly, yes.
So it means that there's extra work, I think, on my part and the team of people that are behind me, training me and preparing me because I am able and I'm lucky enough to be able to go into many different types of music. It means extra work, but also, like I said, you really have to show people, I know you heard me as this, but guess what? I can do this too, just as well, which confuses people at first until they see it. And then they're like, oh, you're right. But indeed, Phantom was difficult. But again, I have to tell you, Annabelle, I lucked out so much for the last 6 years of my life because I've been working with the people that created all of these shows. I worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber directly. I worked with the music staff of Phantom, of Love Never Dies. I went straight to the source. So what was really amazing about that was they gave me a little bit of license to put more of me into it, which was really fantastic. But also it means that our discussions and our coachings and our music rehearsals were very much what's the particular color that is needed for this, so I don't sound like Carlotta or too old but I found that very challenging, honestly. At Phantom, I was singing, I would say about an eighth of my voice and also straight tone and more of a brighter, youthful sound for some things. And it was just, and at first it was very difficult, but coming out of it, what's amazing about that, like you said, is now I suddenly have access to all these new color palettes. So indeed, this last month, I've been looking at some opera repertoire and I'm coming back to it. And it's so fantastic because as a coloratura, soprano, all of a sudden I have this gigantic middle and low voice that I didn't have access to before. And it's so exciting.
And you must have a great chest voice now that you can really employ.
Girl, I have chest voice for a day. It's actually really exciting. It's almost like you have so many options that the quote, I won't say problem, challenge is, well, which one do I pick? Because now there's so many different flavors and colors and shades. But what's really exciting is it means that I firmly believe that my approach then to roles both in music theater and opera will be a little bit different because I can choose from all those color palettes, which was pretty amazing.
And how do people in the opera world, how have they responded to you doing musical theatre and maybe coming back and doing opera? Because I know that the technique in opera is very different. They're maybe not too keen on, belting and the register between the chest voice and the head voice. They like everything to be kind of is it the passaggio? Everything has to be kind of all the same, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that because I was also curious, what was it going to be like when I first crossed over into music theater? Because indeed, people can get a little like, oh, I can't believe you're doing that. But it was quite the opposite. So many people that I knew and didn't know immediately messaged me and they were like, how did you do it? How did you cross over into Broadway? We want to know, how did you do that? And so that was actually really surprising and incredible to me. And to be really honest, once I completed my contract with Phantom, my quote plan, which why do I have a plan? It never happens. My plan always changes. But what I was really thinking was what I originally wanted to do coming out of Phantom in the opera world is opera houses all over the world do a lot of classic music theater, which is not done on Broadway anymore. And quite frankly, classical voices were the ones that were singing it back in the day. So what I was planning on doing solely was, sure, let's do a South Pacific in France. Let's, because why not? I know both worlds. But then when I did Candide just this like a month ago or 2 months ago, I suddenly realized my classical voice is in amazing shape. And so suddenly I'm like, actually, so basically, if one visualizes a Venn diagram, I want to live in both worlds, but not too heavy opera and not too contemporary music theater. So there's not a lot of us that do that, but I know I can feel it in my bones. That's my niche market. So that's what I plan on doing. So sure, like throw a La Fille de Régiment, Adele in a Die Fledermaus, things like that. Of course, I would be lovely to do a juicy role like Lucia or...
You'd be a great composer.
Oh, composer. I mean, I would love to be Serenetta. It's funny because it literally just happened this month that I was like, oh, we got to gear up that French and that German. I've been singing in my mother tongue for 6 years. So yeah, honestly, it's interesting because now I'm kind of where I was 6 years ago, but on a higher level with more doors open to me. And it's very exciting because a little confusing. It's a little confusing, but mostly exciting because I'm most assuredly not done with the opera world. And I don't mean just singing music theater at opera houses. I mean, I definitely want to sing some actual opera because, like you said, too, each art form informs the other. And now I have this whole toolbox of new shiny tools that I've sharpened and shined being in the Broadway world, which is a very different world. And quite frankly, I find it much more difficult in the sense of it's relentless. It just keeps going. And that's not to put shame or put down opera because the schedule is also very difficult. But I have to say in the Broadway world, you're doing 6-8
shows a week. It's so hard.
It's so much, 2 shows a day. I mean, I was doing Candide 2 shows a day. It's just, you can do a lot more than you realize. And having that and all the acting experience that I've gained from these last 5 years, bringing that back into opera. I mean, there's a reason that I love Diana Damrau and Natalie Dessay. They were consummate performers. I mean, right? Like everything that they sang, their coloratura had a purpose. It wasn't just a vocalese. I remember watching Natalie Dessay in probably one of her last productions at the Met that she did. And I was blown away by her her presence on stage. I wanted to know always what she did next. And quite frankly, as someone that lives in both worlds, I don't see a lot of actors that do that, honestly, in the opera world. So I'd like to bring that to the opera world and hopefully inspire others to do so as well.
Definitely. And I was actually going to say, because I mean, you go back to these roles like Violetta and Lucia and Zobinetta, and these are really extreme roles. I mean, you know, they go through very extreme storylines, and I feel like those roles are as much acting roles. And we were just saying that sometimes in the opera world, opera singers maybe get a bit of a bad rap for their acting, and maybe that's something that the opera world should be focusing more on. Is that something that you would also like to bring back into opera as well, that performance and the acting skills you learned from Broadway?
Honestly, 1,000,000,000% yes. And there are obviously many opera singers that I think are incredible performers and
sure.
act well as singers, but there could be more of them, honestly. And it just all has to do with training. And yes, of course, there are other stipulations when you're singing opera that are thrown into the mix that as a Broadway performer, you wouldn't have. You know, the fact that many times you're not mic'd is one thing, but the colors that you have access to, you have to change sometimes. If you have to project, obviously, like you can't be facing each other when you're singing if you're trying to go out to the audience. But there's a reason all my favorite opera singers are actors. Teresa Stratus. I would really like to bring all of my skill set from Broadway back into the opera world. And again, if anything, to inspire, just like, quite frankly, when I was doing Love Never Dies or Candide here, because I mix things a lot, I'm hoping that perhaps there are some young performers that are interested that are classical, that are like, wait, I would love to do music theater actually too then. So I'm kind of hoping to do both, which again is double the work. But I hope it inspires people. I mean, I've done master classes with performers that are, you know, in their undergrad or grad school. And it's interesting because I see the same kind of issues that I remember dealing with, and I wish someone had helped me more with. So I hope that also helps. But indeed, I mean, Olympic singing, and then you put the performance under it. Wow.
Yeah. Do you know Rebecca Kane?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, but yes.
Yeah, because she's someone here in the UK. I mean, for our listeners, she was the original Christine, I think, in the Canadian production of Phantom. But she's someone who is very much keeping the tradition of that operatic sound alive, passing that on to the younger generation. We also here in the UK recently had Felicity Lott. She was in Follies at the National. And I tell you, every time an opera singer appears in a musical, they always get the biggest round of applause.
I'm biased, but I agree, because there's things in the voice that you're like, what? How? Especially like a music theater audience is not used to hearing all the time at this point in history. I mean, look, some of my favorite Christines are classically trained. In fact, there's a new Christine on Broadway. She is the understudy. I think her name's Kanisha. Superb. Like, what a voice. Because when you have a classically trained Christine singing, I mean, wow, what a different sound.
Exactly.
I mean, again, I'm biased. I'm so biased. Or Lisa Vroman, also classically trained. Or you have like Audra McDonald, even Kristen Chenoweth. When it goes the other way too, it's exciting because they're different. Again, they're just a different kind of sound that people aren't used to hearing, which is really exciting.
Yeah. What was it like competing in Operalia?
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh, that was a minute ago too, wasn't it? So that was in London, actually.
Yeah.
So that was my first time in London. You know, it's funny because I still talk to my Operalia buds, like, because there's only like 30 of us that were brought over.
Yes.
And so the Olympics, and I had no idea what was happening. I remember I was just happy to be selected to go because I didn't think anything of it. And then I got there and I was like, oh, this is amazing. But I do remember there were a few things. I mean, the range of experience was vast. I mean, there were people that were already having huge careers.
Yes.
And when you compete against, like, when you're right out of school compared to someone that's already having a career, it's there's no competition. I mean, it's interesting because if I would have done it now with all the experience of just performing, it would be a very different kind of competition because you just understand the pressures, poise, the unknowns, all of that. So on one hand, it was really an incredible experience to see all these people chosen from literally all over the world to come together. On the other hand, you're like, well, it's been fun. But truly, I made some really wonderful friends that I'm still in touch with because it's a crazy, how long we were there for, like 10 days, 2 weeks. And it's madness. Like it's intense. You're all in the same hotel. And I remember like, you're not supposed to sing, but of course everyone's staying in the hotel. So you would always hear like the nervous, like, like happening. Or I also remember, you know, some of my friends, one of them, he was a second place winner, Penipati. He's amazing. But yeah, just like kind of discovering London, or if you didn't get past to the finals, which again, I did not, but which I don't care. Like I made it to Operalia, and just being like really supportive then of each other that were there. It was an interesting experience. I mean, look, also it was fascinating because you had all the heads of opera houses there, which I don't even think they're all at their opera houses anymore. Like any competition, there's a combo, right? There's a lot of talent. There's also a lot of politics. There's
Politics,
also,
yes.
Oh, so many politics.
Tell me about it.
Tis the world we live in. But I had a fantastic time. I loved singing on the Royal Opera House's stages. It was just really, it was superb. It was so much fun, even though it was so much pressure. And again, I think that's why a lot of us are still in contact, even if we're not best buds, but it's really cool to see where a lot of my friends have gone since then, including myself. Like, I think I'm the only one that was like, I'm going to Broadway, bye. But it was pretty magical. Yeah. I love, the acoustics in the Royal Opera House. You guys are lucky. It's like a bathtub in there. It is stunning, but I learned a lot. Also, it was interesting seeing the pressures of what it did to people when they sang. It's definitely a lifetime experience. And I'm really honored that I was able to be there as well. And honestly, the cool thing looking back on it, I know this might sound egotistical, but I definitely belonged there. And I'm so happy that I can look back at it and see that, because sometimes you're like, should I be here? Yes, I should have been. And I'm happy I was. Yeah. I mean, I think Operalia is just about to happen again. So it's cool because like you're part of this like little club now. Like forever, I'll always be an Operalia competitor. So it's neat to see other friends who are also from Operalia.
Fantastic. So in terms of what your future holds, there'll be more opera, perhaps more musical theatre in the pipeline?
Oh yeah, more opera, music theater, TV, film. It's kind of crazy how my tentacles have now gone into many realms. So there's a lot of stuff I can't talk about yet.
I was going to say anything that we might know, or
sadly I can't say yet. But also too, I have to say with the pandemic and everything that's happened, you know, living the law of detachment is best. Like I'm very excited for some upcoming events if they come through and don't get canceled. But yeah, you'll see me around in I think many a place. So,
and will you come to the UK?
Oh, I hope so. And listen, honestly, London is one of my favorite cities. The last time I was there was because of Andrew, when he brought me over to sing at Royal Albert Hall, and like that was amazing. So yeah, I'll be there, girl. I'm like I absolutely love London, so hopefully I'll be there sooner than later.
Yeah, well, at ENO, they do a musical every year. So you need to put your ring in the hat for the next one that they do. They've done Don Quixote, they're doing My Fair Lady at the moment. So
I'm in.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Meghan. It's been so wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Annabelle.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine.